home, I think we had an outline of something we wanted to move forward. So I wanted to thank Susan, and who is our Lieutenant Governor, and I'll touch on that a little bit more later. Denise Merrill, our Secretary of State, and our governor's wife, who actually put this all together on the state level and motivated us. And we came together, a very excited group. It's been an exciting journey. We met first in November, and we've met every month since. And we hope that we put together a great program for all the surrounding communities to enjoy. Not sure if you can see the program with my background, but there's a wonderful program that's available. All of those of you who registered will be getting one in the mail. They weren't quite ready when you picked up your packets, but we will be sending that to you. So welcome. This is our first event. Again, I want to, hats off to the Recreation Department and the library and Historic New England for pulling this together. I mean, there's so many of us doing all these different kinds of things. I wouldn't be dressed today in this outfit if it weren't for Ida Ransom, one of our members, who's great with the sewing machine and got my outfit. So we're all pulled together to, I think, offer a great program. And I, at this point, would like to take a moment to mention all of the partnering organizations. I mentioned Historic New England. Thompson Historical Society is a great partner in this with us. Thompson Together, another local organization that's heavily involved. The Lions Club, we're a donor to the event. Public Library and Recreation, I mentioned. The school has been involved in supporting our events that are hopefully will be eventually held there. Again, Connecticut Humanities, I mentioned Tira, who's our planner. She's also a grants writer. So when a grant came across her desk that seemed like it would fit for our project, she got on it, and we were awarded a $4,000 grant to put all this together. So that was through Connecticut Humanities, and we had private donors. So I want to thank all of them at this point. Leslie, am I moving on to the next point and introducing our special guests? Okay, so I see, you can correct me if Denise has made it in, but I know we have our Lieutenant Governor, Susan Bysiewicz, on. And Susan has served previously as the Secretary of State from 1999 to 2011. As the Secretary of the State, she helped thousands of businesses grow, registered thousands of voters, cut bureaucratic red tape, honored veterans, and fought to keep elections fair. Prior to that, she was a state representative in the Connecticut General Assembly, representing the towns of Middletown, Middlefield, and Durham. She wrote legislation to ban dangerous drive-through mastectomies and ensure that women being treated for breast cancer had proper care. She also fought political patronage and wrote the law to ban lobbyists from giving gifts to legislators. And as a business lawyer and a job creator, she has helped over 60 companies access millions of dollars in capital, expand their businesses, and create thousands of jobs in Connecticut. Currently, she serves as our Lieutenant Governor, being sworn in January of 2019. On a personal note, I'd like to thank the Lieutenant Governor because she never forgot about the Quiet Corner. Over the years, I've been involved with the town of Thompson for over 30 years, and this is not the first time I'm seeing her. She's not forgotten about the Quiet Corner, and especially Thompson. So I want to thank her for remembering us and give her a moment to speak to you. So I'll give you the Lieutenant Governor.
Well, thank you so much for that very kind introduction. And I love that I'm seeing smart, powerful, beautiful women. I love the hats. They're fantastic. I see a lovely white one, a red one. I see the sashes, which are great. And my only regret is that the Secretary of the State gave me a sash to wear at the event that was spoken about earlier at the state capitol, where there were people from almost every town in the state who came to talk about and learn about the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage and learn about how each town and city in the state could celebrate this milestone. And I have to say that it's been a great pleasure to work with our Secretary of the State, Denise Merrill, and our First Lady, Annie Lamont, to celebrate the women's suffrage centennial, but also to talk about how much more needs to be done. And unfortunately, COVID-19 threw a monkey wrench into a lot of the plans that we had, because I think many towns had invited me or the Secretary of the State or the First Lady to participate in events, but since they were all more than 5 people, those events are off. But I'm so delighted when I heard that you were continuing to celebrate despite the challenges of COVID-19. I was really happy to hear that. And I will say this about Connecticut. We are a state that has been at the forefront of women's rights, whether we are talking about suffrage or whether we are talking about trailblazers. So one of our trailblazers is someone that I wrote a book about, and that was Ella Grasso. In 1974, she became the first woman elected in her own right to serve as governor of a state. And that really put Connecticut on the map, because there had been 2 other women that had served as governors, but they came after their husbands. And she was someone who won every office, whether it was Secretary of the State or Congress or governor, on her own, with her husband's personal support, but not because of her husband. And just yesterday, and I thought I would mention this, on May 19th, we celebrated the 98th birthday of Ann Usello. Ann was a Republican city council member in the city of Hartford. She was elected in 1966, took office in 1967, and she became the first woman mayor of a capital city elected in the entire country. So if you add to that, Denise Napier, our former state treasurer, she became the first African-American woman to serve in statewide elected office as our first female treasurer. And we have many milestones to celebrate. Yet I think what the suffrage movement and the centennial reminds us is who was left behind. Because in 1920, although white women got the right to vote, it took us until the mid-1960s with the passage of the Voting Rights Act to ensure that women of color and people of color in our country got the right to vote. And we have so much more to do. So to me, the suffrage celebration is a reminder that we still have pay equity to address, and we've made some good steps forward. We've passed a law in our state that you cannot ask what your past salary was, because that institutionalizes discrimination against women and people of color on employment applications. And we are still waiting for Congress to pass Rosa DeLauro's Paycheck Fairness Act. So while Congress has passed it, our United States Senate has not, and we look forward to having a United States Senate that will pass that and a president that will make it a priority to sign into law. And we hope that at the federal level, people will take Connecticut's progressive measures like raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour and enacting paid family medical leave to the things that can be done at the federal level, because we've done great work as a state. And I see that May Flexer is joining us by phone, and she's been your leader in Northeastern Connecticut, advocating very strongly for the rights of women. And I have to say that I look forward to the day when you can come and visit the state capitol and see that 50% of our state representatives are women. And if you were to watch a State of the Union address, that you would see that 50% of our United States Congress members were women. We still have far to go. Here in Connecticut, we're at 28% of our General Assembly members are women. We need more, and we need more women in our Congress and our United States Senate. We're at about 25% in each of those bodies. And again, I'd say thank you to May Flexer because she is part of an organization called Emerge that encourages women to run for political office. And I hope that each of you will do that. And I will also say that as the person who chairs the Council on Women and Girls in the state of Connecticut, and thank you to Governor Lamont for recognizing that we should have such a council. We're one of just a few states like New York that has one. And I am the chair. Melissa McCaw, our OPM secretary, is the vice chair. And every member of our cabinet, which by the way has half of its members who are women and 40% who are people of color serving, we feel like we make the needs and the issues of women and girls first and foremost. And finally, I just want to say that Eastern Connecticut was a leader in the suffrage movement. And one of the things that I loved learning was the role that women in Eastern Connecticut played in the suffrage movement. And down at the National Archives, there is an exhibit where each state in the country is highlighted for the role that they played in the women's suffrage movement. And when you read what women did in Connecticut, it's really, really interesting to me to know that the women of Eastern Connecticut were leading the way. There were leaders that you may have heard about, like Katharine Hepburn's mom, who was a leader in the suffrage movement in Hartford, but there were many women who were working in the mills in Eastern Connecticut. And the labor union movement understood the power that women who worked in the mills, the thread mills in Windham, the mills all throughout Eastern Connecticut would have if they could vote. And so the labor union representatives at the time encouraged women, and that's why there was literally a car caravan and labor union events going throughout Eastern Connecticut, because they were going from Milltown to Milltown, from Putnam to Thompson to Killingly to Windham, to encourage people to support this important movement. So I have to say, as someone who loves going to Eastern Connecticut, loves the people of Thompson and people across Eastern Connecticut, I just was thrilled to learn, and I never doubted it, because the women there have amazing strength, courage, and persistence. So I wasn't surprised, but I was just thrilled to learn about the very special role that the women of Eastern Connecticut played in the suffrage movement. And so thank you for having me be a part of this. I think what you're doing is great. Can't wait to do something with all of you in person, and I can't wait to go back to the Capitol when it's finally open so I can put my sash on. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. We'll be actually mailing out, now that we have the programs in hand, you will get one, and it'll give you all the list of the activities, so you can come back and visit us, hopefully for a live event.
Excellent.
So thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce May Flexer. She's our state senator. She was sworn into the Connecticut State Senate to represent the 29th District in January of 2015. From 2008 to 2014, May served 3 terms in the Connecticut House of Representatives as Connecticut's youngest female senator. She fought for issues that particularly affect women. She's also been a champion for seniors and veterans in our state. Again, personally, May has taken an active part in getting municipal candidates elected, and she hasn't forgotten her roots, being from the quiet corner. And I'd like to now turn it over to May.
Thank you, Renee. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. And thank you to everyone who has worked so hard to plan all of these events for this year and make Thompson a real bright spot in our statewide celebration of this anniversary. The amazing work that you've done, it makes me really proud to say, I'm their state senator. Look at these great things that they're doing. So I'm thrilled to be here with you tonight. And thank you, Lieutenant Governor Bicewicz, for your amazing partnership in this and your great leadership of this state right now. This is an incredibly trying time, and I have seen you in that same spot in your home, but all over the state in terms of dealing with different issues and making sure that whether it's the census or businesses or just so many other concerns right now, you have done just such a tremendous job in these incredibly challenging times to make sure that our state is led well and that everyone feels connected to state government, and especially the way that you've done it with having so many, being so accessible. So thank you very, very much. You know, as I thought about what I would say to you all tonight, I couldn't help but think about the influenza of 100 years ago, just before the passage of the women's suffrage movement, or the women's suffrage amendment, and what that influenza did to limit their success at that time, and what a challenge it was. They had great momentum going in to 1917, 1918, and then things sort of came to a halt because of the same restrictions that we're dealing with now. This event is not happening in person because of the social distancing requirements that we're all adhering to, and 100 years ago it was the same thing. Events that were planned in communities all across the country had to come to a halt, and the momentum that the amendment had moving forward really stalled. And I think it's a moment to look back on that and take strength from the leaders of that time who were able to persevere and continue to press for states to move forward with ratification and to continue to press the Congress. And I think we should take that example that they gave us 100 years ago and do the same thing now. I think this is a moment when we should recognize that we need women leaders more than ever. As Lieutenant Governor Bicewicz said very well, there's so much more work to be done, particularly here in the state of Connecticut and across the country. And if you look at the global response to this, some of the strongest leaders responding to this current pandemic have been national leaders who are women. whether it's the Prime Minister of New Zealand or Germany. They are the ones who have done the strongest job leading their nations. And I think we need to do more right here in our own backyard to make sure we have more women leaders. I'm grateful the Lieutenant Governor mentioned I do work with an organization, Emerge, that trains women and mentors women to run for office. So if anyone is interested in that, please feel free to reach out to me, because I would love to talk with you about the work that we do. And I'm hopeful that Connecticut can be a bright spot. Just like the Lieutenant Governor said, I dream of the day that the state legislature is 50% female, or frankly, more than 50%. It's a real shame that our percentage is so low. And we particularly have a low level of leadership of Black and brown women. We've seen a 50% increase in the number of Black women serving in the state legislature, but that means we went from 4 to 6. It's not good enough. So I'm hopeful that we can choose this moment to make sure we can get more women leaders elected all across our state, and particularly in this moment, because essential workers are primarily women. The people who we're relying on the most right now, the healthcare workers, the frontline workers in our, whether it's in our grocery stores or in our nursing homes, they are women. And so maybe this is our moment to turn to them and say, the experiences that you're having right now should shape our community, our state, and our nation's response to this pandemic and help make the right policies moving forward. So I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to speak with you all tonight, and I look forward to be a part of your celebrations moving forward, whether that's in this continued electronic setting or perhaps in person if things continue to get better. So thank you all very much for having me tonight, and thanks for all your great work.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time to be with us, May.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
I'm going to turn it back over to Leslie.
Yeah, so we're going to start our program now. And so I'd just like to introduce Marissa Dufault from Historic New England. And so Marissa is the events coordinator with Historic New England. She's also a freelance theatrical costumer, and she's going to present the component of our program, the making of our sashes. If you can see her here, she has a purple tablecloth. You can look up there. Give a wave, Marissa, so everyone knows where they're looking. And so Marissa is going to present on the sash making, and you can make your sash along with her. And she also has a PowerPoint presentation to discuss the role that fashion played in the women's movement. So again, we just wanted to thank May and Susan Beiswitz for attending, and really appreciate you coming. So take it away, Marissa.
Hi, everyone. So I hope you all have your packages. I'm just going to try to make myself more prominent so I can make sure that what I'm doing is visible to you guys. So everybody should have this white strip of fabric here, and then I believe everyone has 2 pieces of yellow and 1 purple ribbon. If you have a question, feel free to unmute yourselves and ask it. I'm also trying to keep an eye on the chat window, so if you don't want to, ask it to everybody, go ahead and shout it out to the chat window, and I'll try to catch it there. But so we're looking at a piece of long white felt, 2 pieces of gold ribbon, and 1 piece of purple ribbon is what we should all have. And then a little tub of glue and some Q-tips and our suffragette button. So this piece of white felt ultimately is going to sit over our shoulder like this. Oops, I lost the end. And then it's going to pin down here at the bottom. So to start off, I found it easier to keep it folded in half while I did this, just because there's a lot of fabric here, and this made it a little bit more manageable. So the setup that we're going for is a strip of gold, a strip of purple, a strip of gold. Make sure that you've got the shiny side out on the ribbon. So once you've got a general idea of where you want these to sit, we're going to start gluing. So just take the Q-tip. I find it easiest to do little chunks at a time. I know it's hard to see what I'm doing, but just dab the glue. Be very, very generous with your glue. The first time I did this, I didn't use quite enough. I don't know why I was trying to be so reserved with my glue usage, but there's no need. Slap it right on there. And then we just start sticking it down. And I like to do kind of 2-inch sections at a time. I find that that kind of works best in terms of keeping it under control. If you start to go further down, then it's harder to keep your lines straight. And we're all just gonna glue for a little while. How's everybody doing? Any struggles yet? We're all gluing successfully? It's so hard in this environment. I'm so used to being able to do this with people, you know, right in front of me, and I can see how it's going.
I just wanted to point out that if you wanted to make Marissa larger, if you go up into your corner and you click speaker view instead of gallery view, thanks May for that tip, you can make her larger so you can just see what she's working on. And then also, oh, you're good, great.
Oops. So too, with the glue, don't be afraid to really, you know, there's no fear of coloring outside the lines here in terms of how much glue you're putting down, because it's white on white, so once it dries, no one's ever gonna see it.
Is everything sticking okay for everyone?
It's a slow process.
Mm.
So the only thing to pay attention to while you're doing this is to make sure that you're trying to keep it as straight as possible as you go down the line, which is why I suggest doing it in kind of 2-inch increments. Oops.
Oh, it looks like we have a participant adding in and coming in.
All right, so how's everybody doing? Where is everybody with their gluing? I just want to check in.
One strip done.
First strip done. I love it. Has anyone run into any issues, any problems, any questions?
I joined late, so I missed most of it.
No worries.
We just started doing.
Do you have the the packet with the materials?
Yeah, you want me to go get it?
Yeah, go ahead and pull those out.
Okay, I gotta go get it.
Sure. So if we're moving on to the second stripe, I would say leave, I mean, it's up to you really. I like to leave a little bit of a 1-inch gap between the two colors because I didn't put my gold all the way to the edge, but really that's a personal preference. You do you.
Okay,
All right, so go ahead and pull that stuff out. You should have a big long piece of white fabric and then
Yeah.
a gold ribbon, a purple, I'm sorry, 2 gold ribbons and a purple ribbon.
yeah,
Okay, so if you lay,
and some Q-tips.
sorry?
I got Q-tips and a pin.
Perfect, and you have some glue, right?
Yeah.
All right, so lay a piece of white felt out. It's folded in half on my table. I recommend doing it that way just because there's a lot of fabric. So by
Okay,
keeping it folded in half, it's easier to manage.
okay,
And then you're gonna do the 2 gold ribbons on the outside and the purple ribbon on the inside. You wanna make sure the shiny side is up and just start gluing it down.
okay. So I fold it in half.
Yeah, so the full, here, this is gonna come apart a little bit. So the full piece is very long.
Yeah.
It sits over your shoulder, like so.
Yeah,
But so I found it easier to keep it folded in half just because there's a lot of fabric
okay.
and it was a little unruly.
So I use the Q-tip to put the glue down.
Glue down, exactly.
Okay. All right, so I do that all the way around
All the way down with all
on
3.
both sides. On both edges.
Yep, so the gold pieces go on the edges and the purple goes in the center.
Okay,
So I'll try to hold it up. So
okay, I got it.
sort of like this.
Okay,
A little hard to, I haven't glued everything down yet.
I'm not gonna glue it right now because I'm at my desk. I want to do it where it won't get.
That's fine. In fact, I think what might be the way to do this, and Leslie, tell me if you don't want me to do it this way, I might have everybody keep gluing the rest of their ribbons down while I talk about.
I was just going to suggest that, Marissa. I was just going to say, now that folks have the idea sort of where they're gluing, they can keep gluing. And Marissa, you can, yes, get started on the
Leslie, I am chat window, so you can keep an eye on it if people want to ask questions or anything like that.
Okay, so then after I get it.
Yep, I'll do that.
All right, I should have shared my screen before I minimized it. Okay. All right, so hopefully you all can see my screen. There should be a big purple image with some people on it that says fashion as social commentary. Oops. So I'm going to talk about a couple of small things. Well, no, I'm going to talk about a lot of things leading into the fashion of the suffragette movement, because there's a lot that goes into play here. But initially, I just want to talk about how, we tend to, we hear the word fashion and we think of like Hollywood or Paris or London or something like that, and this idea of like glamour and maybe even a kind of frivolity or something that isn't to be taken seriously. Fashion isn't really seen as something important, but throughout kind of all of history, particularly recent history, people have been using fashion as social commentary. For example, the pictures that I have here, they're just people wearing clothes, but you look at those clothes and it immediately sparks something in your mind. You know something about that person based on what they have chosen to wear. And these particular things, they've chosen to wear those things deliberately for those reasons. They want you to make those connections. And that's what the suffragettes did. The interesting thing about the way the suffragettes did it is, in these pictures, these people are wearing, for the most part, they're wearing these outfits to set themselves apart from other people, to be counterculture, as opposed to the suffragettes, at least the 20th century suffragettes, who wore what they wore to look like everybody else. They specifically wanted to wear the clothes that everybody else was, that other women were wearing, and they specifically wanted to be fashionable. They didn't want to be counterculture. They didn't want to be seen as different from the general public, which is, I think it's very unique to the suffragette, the fashion movement of the suffragettes, because I don't know of many other examples of that throughout history. But we are gonna go a little bit back to, oops, there we go, to the pre-20th century suffragettes. So mid-19th century dress for women was intense. The silhouettes were wide, skirts were huge, waists were tiny, sleeves were gigantic. There was a lot of metal involved and like layers of skirts, and nothing that was conducive to comfort or movement or anything like that. So early suffragettes, we're talking like Elizabeth Cady Stanton, went the typical direction of fashion as social commentary, and they did start to wear clothes that made them outliers. They adopted what was known as the bloomer costume. So I'm coming to you from my sewing room, which is Bloomer Central. I know a lot about bloomers. But so back in the mid-19th century, a woman named Amelia Bloomer, hence the term bloomers, popularized this outfit that consisted of billowy long pants gathered at the ankle with a skirt worn over them. She happened to be Elizabeth Cady Stanton's neighbor and friend. And so the two of them and other women kind of pioneered this outfit for women that for the first time was something that allowed a freedom of movement that they'd never had before. And that sort of became tied to the fight for women's rights. It was the women's dress reform was an entire movement unto itself, because women who worked in factories, their clothing was dangerous even because of, you know, everything involved in it. So women's dress reform advocates really pushed for this bloomer costume. Eventually, opponents started to paint women who wore bloomers as deviant or not womanly. They started to really push this idea that if women continued to wear bloomers, they would become like men. And you can see it in some of these cartoons, which it is amusing to me that the worst thing that can happen to women wearing bloomers is to become like men. Do men not see the irony in this? But so we have these cartoons of this woman, she bought a bicycle and bloomers instead of the furniture. And this other one, it's hard to read, but it says, the intention is the woman saying this to her husband, wait, dinner not ready yet? What have you been doing? And there are more on the next page that really pushed this idea that women wearing bloomers was going to lead to them doing all sorts of bad things. So ultimately what ended up happening was the bloomer outfit fell out of fashion. As you can see it on the PowerPoint slide, but I'll read it out in case anyone can't see the video. Amelia Bloomer is quoted as saying, "We all felt that the dress was drawing attention from what we thought of far greater importance. The question of women's rights to better education, to a wider field of employment, to better remuneration for her labor, and to the ballot for the protection of her rights. In the minds of some people, the short dress and women's rights were inseparably connected. With us, the dress was but an incident, and we were not willing to sacrifice greater questions to it. So they acknowledged that the, fervor created over the bloomer costume was actually detrimental to their cause. And so suffragettes started to dress more fashionably. Susan B. Anthony, in fact, was never an advocate of the bloomer costume. She felt that women didn't have to emulate men to get the same rights as men. She didn't think that women had to dress like men. We could still be women. We could still be feminine and womanly. We didn't have to try to be like men in order to have the same rights as them. Let's move to the next slide here. And happily, as the century turned, silhouette started to streamline a little bit. So that helped. So you can see, as opposed to the undergarments and dresses of mid-19th century, as we get into the 20th century, fashion is a little bit more forgiving for women. The skirts aren't as full, the corsets aren't as tight. The skirts themselves are ever so slightly shorter, so women can move again. They don't have to be in the bloomer costume to have that freedom of movement that they had, which was the reason they started wearing the bloomer costume in the first place. So I just want to talk a little bit about the mom from Mary Poppins, because for me, and I think for a lot of people of my generation, and even generations before me, and I hope generations after me, Mrs. Banks from Mary Poppins was my first introduction to the suffrage movement. And granted, this was the British suffrage movement, but we're all sisters. And so she really is what I think of when I think of the suffrage movement. And I think that she exemplifies what they were trying to do fashion-wise, because she is the picture of loveliness and femininity. She's got these pastel colors and the ruffly collar, and she's very fashionable. And that's exactly what the suffragists were trying to do. They wanted to be fashionable. They wanted to be seen as feminine and demure and pure, so that they would create an immediate, oh, I've lost my place. Well, in any event, their goal was to immediately discredit opponents who wanted to call them unfeminine for wanting equal rights. If they continued to dress in such feminine ways and continued to be as womanly as possible, then those arguments held no water, which is why they strove to be as fashionable as they did. Not directly related to suffragettes, but kind of indirectly related, around the turn of the century, early 1900s, there was, I've seen it referred to as the hat pin panic. I've also seen it referred to as the hat pin peril. Part of Edwardian fashion, which was the turn of the century style, involved big hats. There were a lot of feathers and flowers, and they were big and heavy. So they wore these hat pins to keep the hats in place. And one woman realized that she could use it to defend herself. She was on a train, and she was getting a little bit more attention from the man sitting next to her than she wanted. And at one point, as he, tried to overstep his bounds, she took out her hat pin and stabbed him in the arm. And women across the country responded to this, and it started to kind of become a wave of, it allowed for a sort of independence in women that they hadn't had before, because they could use this as a means of self-defense that prior to this, they kind of had to rely on men to protect them, and suddenly they could protect themselves. Eventually, it started in Chicago, and then it spread across the country to other cities and states. They started to pass laws to limit the size that hat pins could be, because they, then started to realize that women were basically walking around with little swords in their hats. So, and then that style of hat went out of fashion anyway, and the whole thing kind of just subsided, particularly as we went into the First World War. It started to, you know, it wasn't a priority. But I just think that's such a fun little nugget of fashion history. So then we get to the actual dress of the 20th century, early 20th century suffragettes. They adopted white as their color. They wore white to symbolize their purity, their, you know, femininity, but also white clothing was easier and cheaper to obtain than colors, dark fibers that required a lot of dye or things like that. Most women had a white dress, so it was easy to put on that white dress and you immediately identified yourself with that group. And then of course we have the sashes. We, in the United States, we had purple for loyalty, white for purity, and in the UK they had green. We had yellow as a sign of hope, but also to pay homage to the sunflower, which Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony had used in their suffrage fight decades earlier. So another big part of the outfit uniform of the suffragette were these pins. Some were very general, some were very specific, but it became a thing that women collected, which I think is just fantastic. Because even like pins are still a thing. People still collect pins. I've got pins on my jean jacket, you know. And you see there are, you know, women had their pennants and they put their pins all over them, and a lot of them had stories that went along with them in terms of like the ballots for both, for example. That particular pin came about because a woman got into an argument with a man who misunderstood the votes for women and interpreted it as votes for just women. And so they put forth this pin that said ballots for both, because they're not trying to take the vote away from men. They're just trying to bring it to both. But one of the more prominent stories of the pin is the Jailed for Freedom pin, which was presented to a group of women. Alice Paul, I think is her name, was the leader of this group of women who were jailed during a protest. And when they were eventually freed, fellow suffragettes held a ceremony for them and presented them with this pin, the Jailed for Freedom pin, which I think you can still buy replicas of today. I just think it's such a cool, you know, the idea of the pin was so inherent to the suffragette uniform that it was given as like an item of honor to these women for what they had been through. And then my last two slides are just some pictures of some suffragette rallies. So part of the reason that white was chosen was because this picture is such a great example of it, this picture on the left. And a lot of that has to do with the lighting on this particular angle, but look how angelic she looks sitting on that horse. I mean, it's like she's radiating light, and that is really what the suffragettes were going for when they chose white. They wanted to have this sense of just purity and etherealness. And then this other photo was just a cool photo of a march. This photo in particular I'm going to end with, because again, the great thing about choosing white as your color is look at that stark contrast between this column of white, these white dresses down this street, and then all of the dark coats and suits and everything of the men on the side. It's just such a sharp contrast, and they wanted to stand out. They wanted to make themselves this identifiable group in contrast to this kind of herd of men in their suits. I think that's my last slide. It is. So ultimately, you know, the role of fashion in the suffrage movement was different than the role of fashion in like every other political movement ever, because women really, they chose the clothing that they chose because it was fashionable. They strove to be fashionable. They wanted being a suffragette to be the in thing. They wanted it to be a cool thing to do. And in order to really drive that home, they focused their attention on wearing clothes that made them fashionable. And I just love the cleverness of that. You know, I feel like they kind of took the argument of the opponents and they said, okay, fine. You want us to continue to be feminine and womanly? Great, we're gonna do that. We're still gonna fight for our rights. And I just love how important fashion was to this particular movement, because it is something that we tend to not think about as political, but it was, and it is, it continues to be. White continues to be a color that women wear to protest and make statements, and we have the suffragettes to thank for that. All right, sounds good. How's everybody doing? How are we doing with our, I'm gonna unshare the screen.
Does anyone have any questions for Marissa on her presentation before we share our finished product, or we check in to see how folks are doing? If there any questions for Marissa, you can unmute yourself or raise your hand. Well,
all right, how's everybody doing with their sashes?
Anne, you have a question, Anne?
Yeah, where does the pin go?
Oh, okay, so if you're done with your sashes, so mine is not done. Obviously, I only glued one strip down and it's probably not even dry. But if you're done gluing, I would actually recommend letting these dry for a little bit longer before you do this. But the pin is what's going to hold it together. So we drape it over our shoulder. I'm doing this in the camera, so forgive me. And then just cross it over and pin it right at your hip. There are some extra safety pins. If it's too big, if you need to cut it down to a more reasonable length, feel free to do that. But ultimately, our goal is this.
And so you can use your pin. Some folks are using it as Marissa pinned it together at the bottom. Some folks use the safety pins to pin the bottom and then put their pin up on the top. So it's really your preference. I know if you look at Erica, you have yours on the top, right, Erica? So she puts hers on the top up there. So you have a few extra safety pins. So you could do either, you know, you can either use it to clasp the bottom together or use those other safety pins and then use it up at the top, either one.
Marissa, if I could just chime in real quick. This is, your presentation was really fascinating, and I totally identified with what you said about the suffragettes and Mary Poppins. And also, I just thought it might be interesting to share with everyone that I'm so glad to learn the history of why white was chosen, because there have been several times in the state legislature, and something we really wanted to do this year when the House and Senate were still meeting in person. We would have days where all of the women, Democrats and Republicans, we would all wear white together.
Yep.
And that would just be, you know, a fun way to both demonstrate that there aren't enough of us, but also, you know, have pride in the suffragette movement and how far we have come. And I'm fascinated to learn that detail about why the white color was chosen, because the reaction that I've had among you others, we want to wear white because white is the least slimming color. So now I'm glad to know the real reason that white was chosen. So thank you so much. That was really interesting.
Oh, fantastic.
And I know that Ida shared that she actually has one of the jail pins. Is that correct, Ida? One of the jail pins? Oh, I can unmute her.
I have to unmute myself, yes.
Yeah, there you go.
I just posted, search on Google under jail pin and you'll find some places do not have them available right now.
You can add that to your costume and to your sash as well, if you wanted to add some more pins.
It also makes a great lapel pin on a jacket.
Anyone want to show their progress? Anyone finished theirs or still drying? Everybody's still drying. Well, I think I'll just speak a little bit to, I just want to give Marissa a round of applause. Thanks, Marissa, for your great presentation. And I'll just speak a little bit to a couple of events. So, you know, we're not having a traditional Memorial Day parade, but in Thompson, but there will be a parade route going through, and you can find that information on the website. And we encourage you to stand outside with your sash, stand outside at your home and wave to the parade and show your votes for Women Pride. And then, like I mentioned at the beginning, we do have several more events. Our next event is a Zoom event, June 14th, for Prudence Crandall Legacy by Don Williams. And then in July, we'll have an all-women's band performing in Riverside Park, Chirapen and the Snakes of Amazonia. And then the only ticketed event that we have is the No More Pink Teas in August at Roseland Cottage. And then in September, a performance by the Proper Ladies. It's a comedy performance, song and dance. And then on October 8th, Susan B. Anthony, played by Cheryl Fay, is performing in Rascavage Auditorium as well. So we will be, adjusting the events as needed and continuing to meet and persevere. As May said, as I did 100 years ago, we won't let this pandemic stop us from gathering together in one way or another. So we're excited to, again, the kickoff event, and it's great to see so many folks participating. So
I have a question. I heard that there was going to be a virtual parade. That was posted in the invitation on the recreation site when you registered. So is that not the case?
Right, so they are going to do a parade. But what we'd love is if you take a picture of yourself and send it in, and we want to share those pictures. So I'll be sending an email to folks after your sash is completed, and we want to put a kind of slideshow together to share, to show all the participants in their sashes.
Okay.
Anything else? How do they look, Melanie? Did you guys complete them? Look drying?
Oh, nice.
It looks great.
Oh, again,
Great job.
Comes up there.
So one of the things early on when I was talking about the whole program, we agreed, I think we were 13 initially, I think we're up to 15 now of ladies on the committee, that the number one goal is to increase voter registration and participation. So that is the underlying theme, and at every event we were promoting registering. So you can register to vote online. Voter registration, is it ct.org? May? You can register online. You can still get the cards. We can mail them to you. So that's an underlying theme of all of the events that we're hosting.
Well, thank you everyone for a wonderful program. I have to go, but thank you so much. And I will send a photo of myself with the.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Melinda.
For joining us. Any other questions for Marissa or for Renee or for myself? Upcoming programs. And if you want to also just respond to the email or give the rec office a call, I'll be happy to register you over the phone for any future programs as well. So
May I give you the address for Voter Online? It's voterregistration.cp.gov/OLVR/welcome. In other words, just search Connecticut Vote Online.
There you go. Perfect.
Register.
And I can send that out to folks as well. So.
I have a question.
Sure, Anne.
This Monday, you're doing a parade, and we should stand out on the lawn with our sash?
Yeah, I'll send you, if you live in Thompson, there'll be a parade route, and I can share that.
Okay, thanks.
So just I thought that was a point of clarification too. So it is going to be pretty much the normal parade route that they do, that Main Street Route 12 loop.
Okay.
But they're not getting out of their vehicles like they did. I mean, they used to march, and there were some vehicles, and they stopped at every cemetery along the way. So it's all going to be in vehicles. Suffrage ladies will be in a vehicle. Veterans will be in vehicles to keep that safe distancing.
So if you wanted to come down and stand in the town hall or at Riverside Park, and keep social distance, you could do that as well and wear your sash.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks.
Everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Melanie, you've got to explain your background to me.
So yes, that is a work in progress, double wedding ring quilt for my mom.
Oh, I know what it is, but what the heck are you doing making it? That is quite an undertaking. So I wanted you to get full credit for it. I'll even finish saying what it is. So go ahead.
Oh no, so yeah, it's taken on a life of its own. It started off as a one pattern, and then I ended up on a Judy Newmeyer, which definitely seems to be the way to go. So
she is the queen of that tricky piecing stuff. She really is.
Yes, and she wants this to be queen size. So
oh my god,
yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah, thank you.
I hope you're. Are you? Where would you say you are at your quilting level? Would you say?
I'm not bad. When it comes to the final piecing it together, the curve part will be a little.
Indeed.
challenge.
How long have you been quilting? Because not many people should take that project on. So I am super impressed.
Well, gosh, 20 some odd years now. I think.
Okay. All right. Okay. Good.
So-
Phew. I feel better for you.
But
Otherwise,
I will be reaching out to you if I get
no.
stuck.
I will never ever make that quilt. I have dozens of quilts in my house. And given away dozens more that I know I will never ever make. So it is very impressive. Kudos to you, and I hope it goes well for you as
Thank
you
you.
complete it. Queen size. That's impressive. So, I couldn't let you go until I knew more about that. Thank you so much for sharing.
No
We hope you-
problem. Have a great night, everyone.
Hope you see you on June 14th for Don Williams. That's a Sunday afternoon at 4.
All right.
Curbside service at the library starts Tuesday. Hope you hear
So excited.
Yay. Thanks, Marissa. Good to see you.
Thanks, Marissa.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, May.
Bye, all.
So, suffrage ladies, if you wanted to, our committee, if you wanted to, those of you who are in the parade, did I lose everybody?
Oh, I thought you were going to tell us to go get a drink or something. Come
I
back.
thought
with
you
our
had that
drink.
covered.
No.
I was going to send an email tomorrow too, just with the details. I don't know, does everybody know their role, what they're doing for Memorial Day?
So we're meeting at 8 o'clock.
So there's a couple members who are going to be meeting at the library because they're standing behind the library,
On Main
back
Street.
side,
On Main Street. Yeah.
with signs, and then the rest of us will be meeting on the hill at 8. We'll have 2 vehicles. We'll have the truck and the Model A, and so from there, that's the important part. So we're going to do the parade thing, and then I'm asking people to come back together for 10. I initially said Riverside Park because that's what the VFW are doing, but somebody pointed out it makes more sense that we maybe meet at St. Joseph parking lot. That way we can go off and do what we need to do, because Ida and I agree that we think going to put a rose at Sarah Munyon's grave in Putnam at the Munyon Cemetery makes a lot of sense. So we thought we'd go do that right at, leave at 10, go do that, and then head over to East Thompson for Erlunia Turtelot Ross's gravesite. Arriving there somewhere around 11, which would be the same time that the VFW will be getting to East Thompson to honor the vet that they're gonna honor. Is that clear?
Yep.
Ida has graciously volunteered to pick up a single rose and some greens or carnation rose, and put in a nice ribbon, so that'll be ready to go. And we'll say a few words at each, and I think, yeah. Now, Allison, was that you taking photographs that you sent during text?
Yes.
Are you taking the photographs with what?
My cell phone?
Oh, like you just took a picture of the screen?
I'm like, is this a trick question?
Yeah, she turned her video off and then took the picture. Yeah. I was gonna do the
well,
same thing.
No, I didn't turn my video off. I'm in that picture. I just
All right.
hold the phone low enough so like it doesn't look like. You got to remember, I've been taking pictures of staff Zoom meetings for weeks now, so I'm a bit of a pro on that.
Erica, yeah. I did try to catch, Marissa had just started when Denise Merrill had joined, and it was like she was just starting, and then I was like getting ready to say like, and I'm texting Renee, and then she left the meeting, so she just logged in very quickly, and then
Yeah, that was a little confusion, I think.
yeah.
Maybe.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, she was a good half hour late, so.
30 late, yeah.
Yeah. There's that too.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so so we
All right,
got
so-
everything under control. We know where we're gonna be.
I took a few photos too, so you can look at them.
There's
Okay.
a way to make an album in your Facebook photos. You can go in and make an album. So someone at this point might want to set up